Hola, mujeres. Bienvenidas a nuestro podcast one more time, which is the last recording of 2024. So we're super excited. And to close off this year, we actually have my sister, Loanna Abreu, who has been in the podcast for how many times? Like 5 episodes already throughout the years, starting like in 2021 and all the way till now. And so she has come back for this episode because she has experienced herself the joy of motherhood. So she recently, 6 months ago, became a first time mom. And as you guys know, my sister is an expert, a therapist, essentially, who has a lot of knowledge on many different areas of what like psychology and therapy is. So we have brought her into the podcast muchísimas veces to talk about, Latinos and mental health and self-care and dealing with all sorts of, things mental health related overall as women, as men. And then today, finally, she's here to talk about her own experience as a first time mom and then understanding the difference between that, her personal experience, like postpartum, being a mom, and also being a therapist. So we want to understand from her point of view because you guys know that our podcast, we're very bold and we want to make sure that everyone can relate. And we know that there's a lot of women out there that have gone through a lot of specific issues, like, you know, um, like pregnancy loss, and then being first time moms, and then having multiple children, and being able to do life with being married and being a mom and being a full time employee and being like firstborn daughter, because we've talked about this a lot. And so today we want to make sure that my sister can share her own experience about her postpartum and being that first time mom. So welcome back, Loa.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you back and close out our 2024 with your experience as a first time mom. So, we're going to go ahead and get started just because we have a lot of questions for my sister, and we know that she has a lot to share with us, which is typically, right, like the point of the podcast. So, we're just going to go ahead and dive right in because we know that our listeners already know you very well based on previous episodes. And if you are a first time listener, we highly recommend you go back to previous episodes and you'll see and understand a little more about my sister's background and what she does and focuses on as a therapist. But with that, we're going to go ahead and ask you the first question, Loa. So, being can you share how your cultural background has influenced your experience as a first time mom in the postpartum period now that you're 6 months, postpartum?
Absolutely. Before I start, just want to say a quick disclaimer. Every pregnancy is very different. Every child and children and baby is very different. And I am only here speaking on my personal live experience. So I just want to put that out there because sometimes listeners take everything too hard or they think that that's going to be their experience. And this just so happens to be mine. On regards to the first question, I want to say I don't think there was something that just my cultural background influenced my postpartum experience. I think there was a series of things now that I was able to reflect on this while I'm here that influenced my experience. I think that um, be a piece of my experience is my cultural background, but also being a psychotherapist that services that population, women that are mothers, that are pregnant, that are going postpartum, that are having losses, all the things that you mentioned. I do see women or individuals that are in that journey. So that having that information and everything that that encompasses with so many different people, it's with me as well. But also the women in my family and their experiences form my postpartum experience too. My doula also helped me think about my postpartum experience and influence my postpartum experience, and unfortunately also social media for good or for bad. So I'm gonna break each of those down. So as far as like my cultural background, I think something that really helped me or that I embraced from my culture is having my parents help me in my postpartum recovery period. Um, my mom and my dad both technically moved in with me to help me with postpartum care. So, like the very first few weeks, I want to say they stayed with me for like 2 months, so 8 weeks. So, the very first few weeks, I literally didn't have to do absolutely anything but take care of my daughter. So my mom took care of the cooking, the clean, everything. When I tell you everything, I didn't have to think about anything. So me and my husband focused on taking care of my daughter. That was something that was really helpful to me. I know different cultures might not do that, but to me that was a game changer, and I could have not survived my postpartum period sane without my parents being a part of that. And when it comes to my clients, so I see a lot of women that go through miscarriages. So I want to say, and I have people in my personal life too that had miscarriages in my family, the women in my family. So I think that was something that was, you know what, you don't know until you're in it. It was one of those things that I didn't realize how much it had impacted me as a person, not just as a therapist, but as a person. Then being pregnant myself, I feel like my first trimester was really hard because the entire time that I was pregnant, I always was thinking about, am I gonna miscarriage? I literally will go to the bathroom and wipe and think about and look to make sure that I wasn't bleeding or anything like that. So the whole pregnancy itself was pretty much like that. But I want to say the very first trimester was the worst. But also with that, I feel like the women in my family too. I have taken care of a lot of children in my family. I've been a caregiver. I've been a babysitter. I am a phenomenal aunt. I would like to think my sister can speak to that. But I that's something that I'm thankful for because of the women in my family exposing me to their children, the ins, the out, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think that's something that also prepared me to like what motherhood is. That is not just rainbows and butterflies, and it's great to be a mom. And I feel like that's something that social media and people let you to believe like being pregnant is the best thing that will happen to you. Yes, and it will fuck up your world. Excuse my language too. It's gonna wreck you in certain ways. So I feel like having that perspective and knowing that okay, things could get tough, but I can survive this because all the women in my family have. So all those things I feel like have been helpful. And my doula, she provided a lot of education when it comes to pregnancy, baby growth, having an unmedicated birth, if you have to have a cesarean birthing experience, all the things, right? And it helped in a way where I wasn't fearful of my birthing experience. I still think as a first time mom, there's also a layer of that. But at the same time, I'm the type of person that I rather know than not know because I want to make sure that in the moment I can make the best decisions for myself because I'm well informed. So to me, that was very helpful. And when it comes to social media is one of those things that I love to hate. I think social media can provide a lot of support and help, but at the same time, I think it can provide a lot of harm if you really just feed into the negativity or like, especially when it comes to postpartum, I feel like, oh, you're supposed to snap back in a month. Apparently, I'm supposed to be the way that I was before being previous to being pregnant, and like social media makes it seem like that's the norm. And we all know here that it's not the norm, that it's okay not to pop back up like how you were before. And that's unrealistic actually. If you're a mom, if you're a wife, you're a daughter, you're taking care of so many people outside of your baby. I don't know how you're expected to come back to your weight like nothing happened a month ago. So I think social media, I take it with a grain of salt, and I like to kind of take it in doses. Like sometimes is this gonna be helpful or not? And if not, I'd rather not fit into it because I can really get in your head. So to sum up, those are the things that help me in my postpartum and kind of hinder me in a way too, because I think it can be something and also can be something else too.
Hey, Loa. Well, thank you. That was awesome to hear that. Um, I know you mentioned like not much cultural, but I was wondering through the process, was there a lot of myths as a Latina that you have? Like, hey, you have, I don't know, I could mention one, but was there anyone that was like a pet peeve? Just I want the audience to feel like, okay, I can relate, and I don't feel bad. I'm a Latina. I'm not following this tradition or this generational I don't know, thing that we're supposed to follow as a mommy.
I love that you said that because, like, I mentioned my mom and my dad were with me the first 2 months, which love them, bless them, could not survive without them. But there's a lot of generational things that I could see through that process too. Like, I remember my dad, especially my dad. He's a funny character. He would be like, "Ay, dale un chin de agua." Mind you, my baby was like 1 month old, and I'm just like, absolutely not. Or like, "Oh, dale un chin de té." Nope, we're not gonna give my daughter tea. Like, absolutely
Okay.
not. So little things like that, or he will be like, I was very concerned about how much she was intaking milk wise. I'm like, am I feeding her? Am I overfeeding her? Underfeeding her? Whatever. And my dad was like, oh no, uno le daba leche hasta que ellos vomitaran. Absolutely not. That is not what we're going to do. So just a lot of those things, seeing how they did it back in the days to how now we do it, and thinking about even generationally in their time, there's a lot of research that has evolved from the time that they were parents to the time that we are parents. And I know they judge me and my sister all the time about like, oh, ustedes no me escuchan a los médicos y no se llevan de uno. I mean, you're not a doctor, so yeah, no, I'm not gonna follow what you're saying. Um, but I think there's a lot of like really helped pave the way for that. Like I remember my mom and my dad would suggest certain things, and I'm just like, thank you, but I'm choosing not to do that. And I know my sister got the brunt of that as a first time, as a first daughter. But I'm thankful for that because she stood her ground. Now my parents are more respectful of the boundaries that I set with them, especially when raising my child. I think they offer it and I either want to take it or leave it, and I would like to think they're not offended with that. But I know how my sister not done any of that. I don't know that that journey will be as easy for me as it is now. Because I think they suggest something, I'm like, oh, you know what? That's a great idea. Okay, cool. But if they suggest something wild, like giving water to my 2-week-old daughter, no, thank you, but not thank you. So just also holding my ground as I want to raise my daughter compared to how my parents raised me. And their response is always like, ustedes comían hasta tierra y ustedes todavía están aquí. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm glad that we're both here, that all of us are here. But just because that was their experience as parents doesn't mean that that has to be my experience too. And that goes to anyone out there. I think that there's so many influences that we have and people in our ears telling us, no haga esto, do this, do that, hold her head, like, I remember, y'all, the first time I went over to my in-laws, the amount of people telling me on how to hold my daughter or what to do and not to do drove me nuts. And I'm postpartum, right? I'm super hormonal. I'm going through it. I'm not sleeping. Like, it's all the things that people really don't think about, that you don't know how you're interacting with a mother and what that mother is going through. You would think they know, but they don't. And I remember that day, so many people would say the same thing. There came a point where I snapped. Greg saw it. Greg is my husband. And he was just like, okay, I think we need to go. And I'm just like, yeah, if one more person tells me how to hold my daughter, I'm going to lose my shit. And they're not going to like me. And we need to go. So also being understanding that it's okay for you to hold your own. It's okay for you to do whatever it is that you want to do and how you want to raise your child, that is okay. Just because people in your life that love you, because they have, more often than not, people have good intentions. But just because someone that you love tells you how to do something doesn't mean you have to follow it, especially if it doesn't sit well with your soul. So I feel like generationally, to me, that was the biggest strain on how back in the days, my parents' generation and my in-laws' generation used to do things, and they want us to do that now, but we have evolved. It's the 21st century. We have a lot of research. Like, I'm not even making shit up. So just grappling with that still until this day. Like anytime I have older people from my family interact with my daughter, there's always something crazy popping up that I'm just like, yeah, no, let's not do that.
Thank you for sharing that, because you are taking off the burden of so many women, like the mental and the weariness, because we feel like we're disrespecting those loved ones, but it's not disrespect. It's just like, hey, this is how I want to parent my child. So, but for many of us that don't get the someone like you or someone to tell them like, hey, I've been to there, done that, it's like hard to decide. Like that takes me back to me. Like I was in my circle, I didn't have anyone that had a baby that I could talk to. So in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, if I don't do that, but they're helping me, how can I not, respect them? And I'm sure like you had to go that to your mom, like, hey, I feel like I owe so much to them because they're here with me the first 8 weeks. Como que no lo voy a escuchar? But yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That was really helpful. Hopefully for those listeners, if you're not going through it, share with someone that's going through it, because this little piece right here is really game changing. But Loa, I know you mentioned that you have taken care of other people in your family, children, elderlies, but also, professionally, you're a therapist, and usually you're used to like helping people process those challenges and emotions. So, with you during postpartum, did you feel that difficult to apply some of those techniques or things that you used to talk about? Was there any like light bulb moments, like, hey, like I thought this was easier, but or adjust? I don't know. I feel like I'm throwing a lot at you, but you get the point. And like, how did anything change in your mindset?
I mean, everything changed. And I'm not even being funny. Like, honestly, I think that, again, it goes back to you really don't know what you don't know. Because, mind you, like, I'm very close to my sister. Like, I've seen all of her experiences. One experience that it stayed with me now that I'm a mom. I saw her birth my first nephew. And, she was in and out. She was like, 1, 2, 3, push. That sucker came out like nothing. My birthing experience was not like that. And that's why I say the disclaimer, because again, and I'm not going to share my birthing experience here. I'm not trying to traumatize anybody, but it was hard. It was hard and it was very traumatic. And that's the thing, you don't know what you don't know. When people in social media are just telling you about, like, it's great, you just do a few pushes and the baby comes out. No, like, I was induced, I was in labor for 36 hours, I was pushing for 3 hours, my sister pushed in 3 push and the baby came out. So imagine I was in my early 20s at the time, maybe 19. I don't even remember. I was very young. And I'm just like, oh, this looks great. This is easy. So I didn't fear being pregnant or having a baby until I became a therapist. And then I knew all the other things that encompasses the birthing experience. So then I got jaded and I knew other things could happen. But again, you have one stream to the other. And I feel like people don't talk enough about the bad. I feel like people want to portray motherhood as this amazing thing, which it is, but it can also, and it is, a very hard thing that you're going through your life, especially as a first time mom. To me, I might be disclosing information earlier than before, but I think just the transition from being just taking care of myself and my husband and just being the two of us to then I literally have to keep a human alive every single day. And even in my hard days, I still have to wake up for her. So, like, that's something that you really don't think about when you don't have a child, because it's just you. If I want to sleep in for a few more hours, if I don't feel like getting up, you don't get up. But like now, I don't have that luxury. And again, you see other people's experience, but you don't see all of it. Like, I remember telling my sister the first time she came to see my baby, like, how dare you? I told her, like, I'm mad at you. And she was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm mad at you because you didn't tell me all of it. She was like, there's certain things you have to go through yourself. And yes, and I feel like I wish I would have known also. They're bad. Again, I think it's just more personal for me because I know some people are just like, I want to live in denial and I just want to learn with the flow. I'm not like that. I rather just be prepared and know what's coming so that it doesn't hit me like a ton of bricks when I'm going through that experience. But again, there's only so much that she can tell me, right? And like some kids are easier than others. How she told me, oh yeah, your baby's gonna sleep through the night because Jatnna did. That's her daughter. My daughter, let me tell you, she humbled me real quick. That was not my experience. So again, I just feel like there's so much. And when it came to being a therapist and also be a mom, so I only took 8 weeks of maternity leave, and then I started seeing clients slowly back up. Even as I was starting to see them slowly, some of my clients were pregnant with me. So that's a whole different therapy session right there. And then they were going through postpartum with me too. So to me, those clients were the hardest because I could relate so much. And like there was a lot of counterference that was happening. And counterference means just when something that your client is telling you is doing something emotionally and physically to you in the session. So a lot of that was happening. So I felt like I had to shelter or filter myself a lot more than what I used to when being in a session. And that's exhausting. So to your question, transitioning from not being a mom to being a mom and then doing therapy was exhausting, to the point where I, not too long ago, decided, like, I tried it out because I was talking to my husband about it. And I'm just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, while I was pregnant seeing clients, that was great. The only thing I had to worry about was being super emotional. Sometimes in some sessions, I wanted to cry because I was hormonal. I was going through many things and I had to hold it together for the client, which I'm pretty good at. So that was that. But the other thing is that postpartum, even if you want to control their hormones or the emotionalness, there's no controlling it. Like whatever it is that needs to happen will happen. So to me, that was very hard. Like being trauma dumped every single day, session after session, and then having to show for my daughter like nothing happened. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I found myself disassociating in sessions to the point where I was just like, I have clients that are like going through hard things in their life, which are valid. And then I have clients that are not going through like very hard, like it's very maintenance. We're like at a maintenance level where they're just checking in, they're updating me, some things might be popping up. And those clients, yo, I'm gonna be honest. Sometimes I've been in that session like, oh, you're complaining about how so and so don't want to talk to you, and you guys have a little friendship tiff, and I'm here like I cannot sleep at night. My baby's going up in the background. So like I felt like sympathy was diminishing. I was just like, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. Because I was just, and in some sessions, they will be venting and ranting, and I'm just like, I could be with my daughter right now. Like, again, all these stats were going on that I never had that before, right? Like, I love being a therapist. That was my butter, my bread and butter. That was my jam. But as I was in postpartum, going through things, I was just like, I don't want to do this. Like, this is exhausting. And something that my sister told me really stuck with me. She said that your daughter, a job is always going to be out there, but your daughter's childhood will not. And that's all I needed to hear. So, and I don't know that she knew what she really said to me in that moment, but I had a conversation with my husband and I was just like, I need a clock in, clock out job where I'm not listening to people's trauma, where I don't have to like sit and be present, because more often than not, I just wanted to disassociate. I didn't want to be in the room with them. And I knew that that's not me, right? Like, especially like as a therapist, right? And I remember talking to my licensed supervisor, because I have to be supervised every so often. And I was telling her how I was feeling, and she was just like, oh, it might just be that you just need to readjust to who you are as a therapist right now. But to me, that didn't cut it, because I'm just like, these people are here paying for a service. They're used to me being this excellent therapist because I am pretty good at my job. And then I'm here gonna give them mediocre. I couldn't do that to me, to myself, or to my daughter, or to my husband. So I decided to decrease my caseload. I tried to get rid of as many clients as I could. I couldn't. Obviously, I was seeing like 30 to 36 clients. And I went down to maybe 10 that I'm still seeing. But going from that to that, it has made a lot of difference. It's still hard because I have another job now at 9 to 5, clock in, clock out, leave that stuff there. No one's trauma dumping on me. And it just gives me more bandwidth to be present for my daughter, to be present for my husband, to continue to build my family. So what I came to the conclusion is this season of my life where I'm building a family, I don't think that I can be a therapist to that capacity. I could not see clients full time. And again, this is a personal decision that I took. To me, it was more important to be present for my daughter emotionally, right? And physically, because like everything that's emotional becomes physical and the physical becomes emotional. So understanding that it's a break. I'm taking a break from that, from what I do on a daily, to doing something that I'm still making money, obviously, because I have to pay bills, but that I can actually be present for my daughter. I know some people don't have that luxury. I'm very blessed in that way that I was able to do that. And therapy is something that I can always go fall back into. But in the next few years of my life while we're building, because we do want to plan for another baby, I couldn't imagine doing that in this time and space, And I talk to other therapists too, where I'm just like, hey, is this normal? And again, I think having people in your life that professionally that can relate to you, and also like moms to me have been like life changing. I could not be surviving being a mother first time without the moms in my life, or the therapists that are women that have children and that they exactly understand what I'm going through. Like one of my peers told me, like, I don't know how you're doing it. And I'm just like, no, that's why I literally had to make a shift. But she was like, even now that my kids are leaving my house, now is that I feel that I could do therapy. And I'm just like, is that supposed to make me feel better? Because that's like 18 plus, 20 plus years. And I'm just here thinking, like, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years, like this season, next 10 years of my life where I'm raising my kids, building my family, I can take a break. But, that resonated with me where I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is valid. This is real. And it's okay for me to make my personal decisions based on what fits myself and my family the best.
And I love that you're sharing all of that, because it's sometimes you have to, once you have children, and I want people to understand that, like, you really have to kind of like reevaluate, right? Like your life and your priorities, because it will change, period. Like you can have the easiest baby, the hardest baby, but I think either way, just because you want to make sure that you're basically paying attention and dedicating time to your family, at the end of the day, like, things have to change. And so I'm glad that you're bringing that up and you're being honest about it, just because there's no, I have not met anyone, at least like in my circle, that has not changed their lifestyle, based on building their family and based on what they're going through. Having children, that have not had to change something to make sure that they're able to be present for their family, and for, and as a person, just like for their self-care, for taking care of themselves. So you have touched on a lot of the questions that we have for you moving forward, but I think there's one thing that I really, really want you to touch on, because you did talk about the fact that, when I went to your house that first time and I went to Migalia, that's my niece, um, you mentioned that you said, right, like, oh, how dare you? You didn't tell me the hardest part of being a mom, right? Like the struggles that you have to go through that nobody really talks about. And then, yes, I did say, well, some things you do have to go through it yourself so that you understand how that will affect you and your life and how you have to adjust. Because other than, I can't tell you that something's going to be a certain way unless you actually go through it yourself. Like I can tell you many, many times, like, oh, this is going to be hard, this is going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. But you won't understand, or it's one of those things that you have to go through it to be able to understand. And I hate to go back to the like miscarriage topic, or like pregnancy loss topic, but that's one of those things that you have to go through it. Like you don't want people to have to go through it and experience that, such a hard thing in their lives, but you would never understand what it is like to have a pregnancy loss or a miscarriage unless you go through it, or unless you have people around you that are going through it. But at the end of the day, like the closest would be having people around you that are going through it. But at the end of the day, like I'm sorry to say it, but like you will never understand unless you go through it. So that's the same thing with like being a first time mom and struggling through the night and feeding your child, and having not being able to sleep, and not being able to do things because you always have to be with your baby. And I know you always mention like, oh, you never told me this, you never told me that, or how did you do this, how did you do that, which I love it and I appreciate it. And I shared everything that personally I did in my life, and how I adjusted certain things to make those things happen. But at the end of the day, you had to go through it to be able to understand and do your own thing, right? That actually works for you and your family. But I think one of the things that I do want you to talk about is if you were to sum up, let's say, like 5 to 10 things that you would want first time moms to know that are postpartum or are pregnant right now and they will be postpartum, what are those hard things that you wish you would have known that you want to share with them, so they understand and they know, like, these are 5 to 10 things that, like, I literally need you to understand and get in your head that will be hard, or you'll need to know to be able to go through postpartum. So what would that advice be? Like, I know I'm throwing this at you now because I just thought about this, but I'm like, I know you know because we've talked about these things. But based on your experience, like, what would you want them to know that you wish you would have known before you went through postpartum?
I feel like that's such a hard question. But you're right. There's things that, as you were saying, that come up to my mind right away. But I know there's things that, even, mind you, I'm 6 months postpartum at this point. But even being 6 months into it, there's still things that are coming up, if that makes any sense. So for me, well, I just think this whole experience is bullshit. And respectfully, like, I know there's women out there that, like, love being pregnant, like, love doing this. But let me tell you, not, and that's the thing that I want of women to talk about the hardships of it all. I feel like even the women that are going through hard things, they're like, they feel like they have to perform. And what I mean by that is saying that, when someone asks me, "Oh, how's pregnancy going?" "Oh, it's going great." No, this shit fucking sucked. I did not enjoy being pregnant at all. But how dare do I say that to somebody? Because people are gonna judge you on that. Oh, look at her. Like, there's people, and that always came back to my mind. I'm like, literally, they're women fighting for their life to become moms. How dare do I say something like that? And yes, and I feel like it's okay for you to humble yourself and think about, like, I am very blessed in this moment, but your live experience, this experience that you're having right now, is very valid too. It's okay for you to be like, this is BS. And I don't want any of it. But I just wish overall, like, I just wish women to women, we were more honest about that this is not rainbows and butterflies, that this shit is hard. And yes, there's gonna be days where you love being a mom, you look at that little joy and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I made this. But also, oh my gosh, how can the same thing that made me so happy be driving me insane? Because there were points in my postpartum period where I literally felt psychotic. Mind you, I'm a psychologist. But when I tell you, lack of sleep, I think the two things I struggle with the most were lack of sleep. No one can prepare you for that. When people are like, oh, get your sleep in. I know that triggered me at the time because you're like, why do you say that? But, like, I'm telling you, they're not joking. Especially if you're someone that likes to sleep, you'll get it in. Because let me tell you, that's not going to be existent the moment you have a baby. And again, every baby's different. I mean, my niece, that little sucker, she started sleeping at 2 months old like it was nothing throughout the night. I cannot relate. I don't know what that's like. So again, to each his own, right? Every experience is so different, but I just wish that, especially when you're pregnant, it's your own experience, something that I wish I didn't beat myself up. And mind you, there's only so much I could do because I had so much awareness and knowledge. Ignorance is bliss. So sometimes if you're lost in the weeds in Google and that's just gonna give you more anxiety, do not, and I repeat, do not do it. I promise you, sometimes just not knowing is better than knowing. Because then that's gonna be in the back of your mind. And we all know shutting off our brain is near impossible. So with that being said, for me it was harder because I still saw people that were going through that while I was pregnant. So I couldn't just be like, oh, I'm not gonna see you my entire pregnancy. I still had to see those clients. So I think that I wish I what I knew, if that makes sense. Because I think I could have, and that's something that even when I can get pregnant the second time around, I am doing that very different where I do want to enjoy my pregnancy, but I feel like there was so many negative things that I knew about it that kept me in being in a fearful state rather than, oh my gosh, yes, this is enjoyable. Well, this is great. And then there's the pregnancy period when if you think your pregnancy was bad, when you give birth, let me tell you, it gets worse to a certain extent. Because at the time, I'm just like, pregnancy sucks. I cannot do anything, especially in the third trimester. Your girl was going through it. Like I was massive. I promise. I was so big. I couldn't sleep. I was uncomfortable. And I know every woman can relate to this that has had a child. But then my birthing experience, I could have never, and I repeat, I could have never imagined that how my birthing experience went, that's how it was going to go. And that's another thing too. Like people in the healthcare industry, they tell you, "Oh, create your birthing plan." I think it's cool if you want to, but let me tell you, that will be go out the window the moment you're maybe 2 hours into trying to give birth. So I think it's cool for you to see your options, but at the same time, do not marry your birth plan because it's just only going to hinder you, especially when things have to quickly shift and change to save your life or baby's life. So yes, it's there as a tool, but do not marry it and just have it on the side. That's the best advice I can give you about that. And then I thought after I was pregnant, I was like, oh, that was easy compared to birthing. And then breastfeeding came into the picture. That shit right there, let me tell you, life changing, life changing. And bad. I think there's so many mixed reviews about it. I feel like nowadays there's a big push for breastfeeding, but also your mental health is so important. If your baby cannot latch, and let me tell you, in the hospital, they will shove that down your throat. If you know from the jump you don't want to breastfeed, do you, boo? Don't do it. It's okay. Fed is best. Your baby will not die because your baby will be eating. If it's not your breast milk, it will be formula, and it's okay. Let's normalize that. Because I feel like mother to women can be so judgy. Oh,
Mhm.
you only breastfed for a week? I breastfed my baby until he was 4 years old. Good for you, Karen. Good for you. But if that's not your experience, that's totally okay. And if that's something you know you don't want to do, it's totally okay too to tell your care team, hey, this is something I don't plan on doing and I don't want to do. Point, period, blank. No further conversation needs to be had. They need to respect that. And when it comes to the people around you, you don't owe anyone anything. If people are like, oh, are you breastfeeding? Are you not? It's totally okay for you to say, that is something I don't feel comfortable talking to you about, period. You don't have to share that either. Because I feel like sometimes, again, most people come from a caring space where they want to, like, they think that they're being supportive, but asking all those questions is not helping anybody. And this goes to anyone that's not a birthing person. Don't ask those questions. That's none of your business. Mind your business. Show up for the mother in other ways. How are you? Can I cook for you? Can I do the laundry for you? What do you need? Instead of asking, how did you give birth vaginally? Was it a C-section? Are you breastfeeding? Like all the things that woman is going through so much right now. That's not what she needs. Let me tell you. And aside from that, just making sure that you're having constant communication with your husband. I will be very vulnerable here. For the first 8 weeks, mind you, I have my mom and my dad helping me, but I literally felt like me and my husband were roommates. We were just surviving. When I tell you, like, the epitome of survival is when you have a child. That's what you're doing every single day. I just felt like we were surviving. I was tired. I was sleep deprived. My Greg only had maybe like 5 days of paternity leave. So I was it. I was taking care of Galia 24/7, clock out, all around the clock. So when I tell you if I was averaging 2 hours of sleep, that was a lot in 24 hours. Let that sink in. So talking to him about it, like, hey, I don't think I can do this. Something needs to change. I know that he has to go to work. He was providing for us financially, but he worked remote. So I also had to step up and be like, hey, this is how I need you to show up. And being vulnerable and open with your husband. I know he's not, if you're with a man, he can never understand the experience that you're going through. But if you don't share what you're going through with your partner, how can they support you? How can they show up? So don't be ashamed to telling your husband, oh my gosh, I'm bleeding so much down there. Oh my gosh, my boobs hurt. They feel like a ton of bricks. Because you're like, oh, I don't want my husband knowing that about me. Girl, if the man was in the birthing room, he already saw all the things I needed to see at that point. So just communicate. Because there was a point where I told Greg, like, I literally feel like we're roommates. What are we doing? And then we started checking in on each other because it's not just you two going through. Yes, you did most of the work, But your husband is also going through it. Your partner, whoever it is, your support person also is going through that too. And I think that as women and as society, we forget to check in on the men too. Yes, we did most of the work, but their identity is also changing. Like I was trying to figure out who I was as a mother aside from Loa, and he's trying to figure out who he is as a father aside from being Greg. And then how are we parents and are married to each other? So just all the things that are shifting at the same time is insane. And I don't think that we ever have the time while you're going through that to be like, oh yeah, let me sit and reflect about the changes that I'm going through. Like valid, but just making sure that we're making time for that and understanding. And honestly, that is something that I'm still trying to process and go through. Like I think aside from the sleep, my professional identity is something that I'm struggling with the most every single day onto this day. There's a lot of guilt because I'm not seeing clients, but at the end of the day, I need to do what's best for me. And there's a lot of things that I feel guilty about, but at the end of the day, it comes down to how do I want to show up for my daughter. And I also think about generational trauma that has been passed down generation through our grandparents, to my parents, to me, and thinking about doing the work too. If you know there's a lot of trauma that you have in your family, let me tell you, that is something that if you really care about your children, even if they're not in this world yet, even better, I think that work needs to happen beforehand. And if you cannot fully do it, at least be aware that these are the things that I know were passed down to me that I don't want to pass down to my children. What can I do about that? And that's going to be an ongoing thing. I'm not listen, you're gonna mess up your child in some way, shape, or form. But if you are aware of the things that you don't want to pass down, I think it's your duty to work on that so that you don't pass that down because there's gonna be other things, right, that are happening. Um, and there's just so much more, but those are the top things that come to my mind. I just when I didn't know what mom shame was until my sister told me about it. But like she said, you don't know what you don't know until you're in it. And it makes me so sad that as women, very thin women, like you went through it, I went through it, and then you sit here and want to judge me about my birthing experience, about breastfeeding, about the type of mom that I am. To me, that's trash. Like, we need to do better as women. How can we show up for each other knowing how hard that is? And that is something that I've been very blessed to. Like, when I tell you, whoever is pregnant right now, planning to have a baby, you need a village. It takes a village. Without the women in my life that are mothers, I could not be doing this. I have so many of them, thank God, in my life that if one's busy, I can reach out to another one. And just because you don't know what you don't know and you don't know what you're doing. And even when you're 2, 3 children deep, if you had a gap in between those babies, you feel like, oh my God, I don't remember how this went the first time. Is this normal? It's ever changing, every baby's different. And I just feel like we just need to be better individuals to each other, to birthing women and showing up for each other. Because I feel like that's something too that as mom, we sometimes don't want to share how we really feel because we feel like, oh, so and so is going to judge me. So and so is gonna think X, Y, and Z. Well, like that person loves you, but just because I know that person loves me doesn't mean I don't think that they're gonna judge me based on everything else that I'm witnessing and experiencing. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to come on this podcast is to tap into the women that hear this podcast and just think about how you're showing up for the women that have children in your life and how you're showing up for them. Because I think sometimes we're so harsh on each other and you don't know what that mom might be going through. And don't judge. You don't know. And just because you would do things different than that mom, that's okay. Your opinion is valid, but just because you have an opinion doesn't mean you need to share it. Sometimes you need to sit there and show up for that person in front of you. That's it. That's more than likely that's what that mom is looking for. Validation to make sure that she's not crazy. Because more often than not, that's all I needed to make sure that am I crazy or is this normal? And again, especially as a first time mom, you don't know what's normal. You don't know what's not normal. You don't know. You don't know. You don't know what you don't know until you're in it. And that's why tapping into the women in your life is important. But if those women in my life are judgmental, am I going to reach out to them? So for that.
Well, I took notes, Loa, and I wrote down 9 things. So, and I'm sure by with the last one, that was 10. Thank you so much for that. Um, I don't have anything else to add because honestly, like with that last thing that you said, is like whoever's listening that has a mom in their life, ask yourself, how are you showing up for them? And also as a Latina, I would say those are the questions. I feel like we're so nosy, like, oh, how did you give birth? And are you breastfeeding? Well, this. And I'm like, sometimes I actually catch myself doing that. So I'm like, okay, like, did I like those type of questions? Or does anyone even want to hear my experience? And sometimes it's like you think that you're trying to connect with them, but sometimes you really aren't connecting with them, sharing your experiences. Like, no, just listen and then think about how can you help instead of talking about yourself. Because that at the moment, it doesn't matter. Unless the
And that's
mom is asking you to share.
and that's the thing. Sometimes, again, I want to say 9 times out of 10, people do have good intentions,
Yeah.
and like you said, Rosie, they're trying to connect because you're like, oh, are you breastfeeding? Oh no, I'm having issues. Oh yeah, and then they go to share their experience because they think that they're going to connect. But sometimes that experience that you're sharing can be received as shame. Because if my experience is not like the one that you're describing, as a first time mom, or as a mom, period, I'm gonna be like, what am I doing wrong that I cannot do what she did? Because think about it, and even in any other aspect of your life, we always internalize. What am I doing? I'm not doing something right. And I think that's the last thing a new mom needs in their life. There's a lot going on for them to feel shame or that their experience is invalid or like they're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So, Jatnna, wrap it up with your lovely sister. Thank you so much, Loa, for sharing. I usually give homework, but I don't know that's it. It's like you said it. Like, I have nothing else to say. Like, for those moms that you have around you, is, hey, how are you showing up for them? And then you are that mom that is pregnant or going through postpartum. Is you do you set your boundaries. You're not being disrespectful to anyone that you love.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're taking care of yourself. And the one that I love is your childhood. Your child's childhood will not always be there, and that job will always be there. I know that's one of the biggest challenges and shames that we feel as a working mom, or if we decide to not be a working mom. It's okay. Your journey, it's okay. Like, I remember someone reached out on asking, hey, I'm struggling a lot. I'm working. Can you guys do a podcast episode about that? And I remember telling Jatnna, it's just like, wow, it's just so hard. Like, everyone's journey is so different. We can't really tell you, like, here are the tips and tricks to be a working mom, and it works great for us, because it's not. It's not. And it's like, and I know that. And this lady, she ended up quitting, and I saw him, like, I am so proud of you. And it's like, because you did that. Like, you're brave. Like, you're braver to quit versus staying, because it takes a lot of courage and boldness to say, like, hey, I'm going to just believe that God got me, and I'm going to do this. And it's like, versus like, oh my gosh, no, like, if I quit, so financial. So I know I'm going everywhere. That's why I say.
But Rosie, I think to your point though, I think we just have to make sure people understand that what works for us, like, we share our experiences and we bring in people like my sister and like other women that have their own experiences with, whatever it may be in life. But what works for us, what works for that person may not work for you. And that's okay. We're only sharing because we want to make sure that if you can relate, that's great, so that you know kind of what to do or what to expect. But in no way anything we're sharing may change your life at all, just because it's our experience and that's ours to share. But you'll have to do, kind of like go through your own experiences to be able to relate or not, or see how you're gonna shift. So yeah.
Bueno, pues nada. Jatnna, you got anything else to add?
Nothing else to add. Loa, thank you so much for coming into our episode today and talking about being real, being bold, being a bold Latina, and sharing your experiences as a professional, but also as a first-time mom personally, and how that's shifted your life and has changed you for the good or the bad, all the things. And so for everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any, I guess, like requests about topics, we would typically ask this once in a while, but for next year, for 2025, if there's anything you want us to talk about, please reach out, let us know, send us a DM or send us an email, and we're happy to talk about those topics and bring in other women that have had those experiences. So thank you so much, and hasta la próxima.
See you in 2025.
Ciao.